Hello, everyone. Mike Valentine here, and welcome to episode 3 of week 3 of the Sports Pulpit. This week's topic is the NFL Supplemental Draft. We will define the draft by telling you why it exists, who is eligible, and how it works. We did that in episode 1. Then we'll talk about current Texas Tech quarterback Brandon Sorsby and what the supplemental draft may mean to him and his NFL career. We did that yesterday in episode number 2. And today, there are 4 guys who have been involved in the supplemental draft, and each of them has 4 different variables of success in the NFL. We'll talk about each one of them, and we'll compare them to what Brandon Sorsby may possibly be before it's all said and done. Tomorrow, we're going to research if gambling is becoming a problem in college football and what are the ramifications of it if it is a problem. And then in episode number 5, we will research which teams could be interested in Brandon Sorsby if he is put into that NFL supplemental draft. And we'll ask if the possible potential is worth the possible punishment. All right, guys and gals, let's jump into this a little bit more, shall we? Now, yes, you heard me right earlier. 5 short-form podcasts this week. So to ensure that you don't miss any of them, subscribe to our channel, All Gloves Off Sports Media, where you can get an absolute ton of content like the Red Hot Reds podcast, Minor League Mondays, Football with Cheese. He and I combined on Tuesday nights, the Lights Out Sports podcast. And we now have 2 new podcasts here on All Gloves Off Sports Media. The first is Fanboys Unleashed, featuring Mr. First Down. And we now have a wrestling podcast that we've got, Cheap Pop Society. All of that right here on All Gloves Off Sports Media. So with that being said, and knowing that it's free to do so, subscribe, make that bell ring, like our programming, and talk us up by sharing our great sports content on your social media outlets with all of your friends. Now, I want to talk about 4 people chosen in the supplemental draft, and I want to highlight each of them, for different reasons. Our first guy was taken so long ago that you might forget that he was taken in the supplemental draft. It was way back in 1985. And he actually accelerated his college career so that he could graduate early. He busted his butt to get everything done, to graduate, to get his degree, and then he found out that he couldn't even be part of the NFL draft, so he had no choice but to go through the supplemental draft, where he was chosen in the first round by the Cleveland Browns. He then led the Dog Pound to 3 AFC Championship games in 5 years, and his name is Bernie Kosar. Now let's focus on the Ohio State connection that we mentioned a couple times here during these episodes of the broadcast. I want you to remember back to 2011. Terrell Pryor was accused of selling memorabilia for cash. Something that I don't have a problem with whatsoever, as I've paid for signatures several times in my life. If you can see the room, you'd know it's true. You can see a little over my shoulder, but that's just a fraction. But he did this before NIL and before everything that's changed college football over the last few years. Pryor knew he was going to be suspended by the NCAA, So he just went ahead and joined the NFL in their supplemental draft. Now, as we talked a little bit yesterday, if you haven't seen the first episode or the second, I would urge you to do so. When you join the NFL supplementary draft, you then join the NFL. And the NFL can then punish him at will, as long as they can justify why they're punishing him. And they can do that with Brandon Sorsby too if they decide. So the NFL went ahead and held up the 5-game suspension that he would have gotten in college. Terrell was allowed to practice with the team, but not participate in any kind of games for those 5. He was then chosen by the Raiders in the 3rd round and was able to carve out a nice little niche. 9 years actually in the NFL, where he played both a quarterback and a receiver. Let's look at our 3rd guy. In 1987, the Boz went from Oklahoma to Seattle through the supplemental draft and signed a record-setting contract. Before I give you these numbers, remember this was back in 1987. He signed a 10-year, $11 million contract. But he only played 3 seasons due to arthritic complications in his shoulder when he got injured against the Arizona Cardinals. He recorded 4 sacks, he forced 3 fumbles, and he had 3 fumble recoveries. Even though he had a 10-year, $11 million contract, he played in only 24 games and retired at the age of 24. He was not allowed to play in the Orange Bowl following his junior year because he tested positive for steroids, which is why he had to enter the supplemental draft. He claimed that those steroids were prescribed to him by a physician. You could do some more research and look into it all and find out if you agree with Boz or if you agree with the NCAA. Finally, wide receiver Chris Carter was also a participant in the supplemental draft. He was declared ineligible after it was discovered that he secretly signed a contract with an agent, a big no-no back then. He went in the 4th round of the supplemental draft to the Eagles. Yes, Chris Carter went in the 4th round of the draft because it was the supplemental draft to the Eagles. But as you may know, Chris Carter had a very successful NFL career. In fact, Chris Carter's in the Hall of Fame if you didn't know. And he is one of only 14 NFL receivers ever with 1,000+ receptions. There's only 14 of them. Chris Carter was one, and he went in the supplemental draft. Now, he owns several other records. We're not going to go over all that right now, but pretty darn successful. Now, I'm pretty sure that Brandon Sorsby is going to have to enter the NFL supplemental draft. But will he have Pryor, Cozart, Bosworth, or Carter success? Only time will tell. But which do you think he'll be closest to? Comment below and vote on our poll question on our X account at AllGlovesOffSM and let your voice be heard. Tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, we'll continue this series looking at gambling and how it can affect a player's eligibility. We'll also answer the question, is Sorsby just the beginning of a poison that has slowly slithered its way into sports and into the athletes who play them? As we bid you adieu, and thank you very much for joining us once again for this 3rd episode of 5 of the Sports Pulpit, looking at the NFL supplemental draft in a deep dive. Please remember this, the quote by Ernie Banks: "The only way to find out if you're a good sport, ladies and gentlemen, is to lose."